So, why does self improvement feel empowering for some people and oppressive for others? Basically, the thesis for this video is that self improvement isn't just personal, it's cultural. And if you can learn about that, you can know how you can strategically approach self improvement in a way that aligns with your background and maybe combat some of the weaknesses that your upbringing or your culture might have instilled within you. So you might be wondering, like, what authority do I have to speak on this topic? Probably nothing, honestly. The only intel that I will say that I bring is that huge self improvement nerd. I was born in a Northern European country, but grew up in North America, so I do have that cross-cultural connection, and then lots of friends from all over the world. So I did some research on this and the psychology and sociology behind it. So we're going to talk about it, and hopefully you guys might find it interesting. Please like and subscribe if you do, and let's jump into it. So basically, the science of cultural psychology. There is individualism and collectivism. So individualistic countries such as the US, UK, Canada, Australia, they emphasize autonomy, self-expression, personal goals, and basically becoming your best self. Meanwhile, collectivist cultures, which include like Japan, China, Korea, and many African and Latin American cultures, they emphasize duty, harmony, family obligation, and fulfilling your role. And so the impact that this could have on self-improvement is that self-improvement in individualistic cultures is self-actualization, while self-improvement in collectivist cultures is more like self-regulation for group benefit. So again, connected to how you are playing your role within that larger group. In terms of East Asian versus Western motivation, research shows that East Asian students respond more strongly to criticism than motivation, while Western students respond more strongly to positive reinforcement. I'm chuckling because I feel like I'm I'm a perfect case study for this. If I in school got positive reinforcement, I'd try so much harder, but if I was criticized, it would sort of demotivate me. So the implication here is that some cultures normalize self-critique and others normalize self-esteem as sort of a protection. And I think that is super, super connected to the culture that you're brought up in. And this shapes how you respond to failure, whether you pat yourself on the back, and whether discomfort feels constructive or threatening to you. So again, we're going to talk about this more later in the video, but I'm not just making this video for actually I do actually find this fun. I was going to say I'm not doing it for fun. I am doing it for fun. However, I also do want to hone in on the practical element. So this is a really great example of I know that sometimes criticism is demotivating to me, but that's obviously not a good way to live my life. That's not going to help me get farther in life. So that's something that I actively have to, remind myself that criticism is not something that I should be demotivated by. Then there is the concept of tight versus loose cultures, which is some research by Michelle Gelfand. Tight cultures have strong norms, low tolerance for deviation. Examples would be Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and Turkey. Meanwhile, loose cultures have flexible norms, high tolerance for difference, and that the examples would be the US, Netherlands, and Brazil. I am going to add a caveat to this that I do think that sometimes in research things are different than actually in real life. For example, in the Netherlands, sure, there's a lot of flexibility. It's a very liberal country. However, I actually would go as far to say that I've heard many Dutch people say that actually there isn't a lot of tolerance for difference in day-to-day life. There's even a saying in Dutch that directly translated is just be normal. So that's, if you're Dutch, you will probably know what that translation is. Tight cultures, discipline is expected, social accountability is high, and deviation from success norms carries a social cost. Meanwhile, in loose cultures, exploration is encouraged, reinvention is accepted, and there's a little bit more trial and error and flexibility in the path that you can take. Of course, there are downside trade-offs for both. So tight cultures, there's a lot of pressure, conformity, and stress. Meanwhile, in loose cultures, there may be a lack of direction and inconsistency. Then there's also something interesting to say about cultural attitudes towards suffering. So you might have heard some of these concepts before, but Protestant work ethic, that's if you're a history buff, you're going to know the backgrounds of this. I know that there are historical ties to all of this. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty there, but Northern Europe and North America, there's a hard work equals moral virtue, productivity equals character. Confucian effort belief is that effort is more important than innate talent, struggle is honorable, and academic perseverance is highly valued. This is sort of, I won't say like a total polarization, but it's a slight distinction then from Scandinavian lagom. I don't know how to pronounce this, guys, so please don't come for me. I'm sorry. Lagom and balance. So they value moderation, avoid extremes. There's a value for work-life balance. I actually, when I was in Denmark and Sweden, really noticed that, like, even just being there for like a week or two was really interesting. Work-life balance is really important to them. Meanwhile, that might not be the case in some areas of North America. Now moving on to Latin and Mediterranean cultures, social connection is prioritized, so it's less isolated. Enjoyment is very much integrated into our daily life. Achievement coexists with relational richness. So this is going to impact your threshold for burnout, rest, hustle, delayed gratification, and this all may be culturally conditioned. So again, I'm coming back to this point here. Try to start reflecting on how this maybe is actually impacting you on a day-to-day basis. And if you are somebody that strives for growth and self-improvement, it's actually really helpful to know how you might be culturally conditioned, so that you can either play to those strengths and then also combat the weaknesses that maybe you took along for the ride as well. So is self-care a Western concept? Basically, yeah, it kind of is. It's rooted in American therapeutic culture, influenced by humanistic psychology, and it emphasizes boundaries, emotional validation, and personal fulfillment. In contrast, many cultures, emotional endurance is admired. I've heard this a lot from like German friends, Dutch friends, countries in that area of the world, that pain is like kind of just seen as a part of life. Inconvenience, it's a part of life. In some cultures also, therapy may be stigmatized, while that is very much not the case really at the right now, at least in North America. So the question is self-care universal, or is it culturally constructed? And I definitely think that in some countries, saying even like, oh, I'm doing self-care would probably be maybe judged rather than applauded. Meanwhile, in many North American places, it's applauded for sure. Another concept to touch on is autonomy versus obligation. So this is research on self-determination theory. Humans universally need autonomy, competence, relatedness, but autonomy looks very different depending on what culture you grew up in. So in collectivist context, choosing to fulfill family expectations can still feel autonomous. I want to honor my parents, maybe. I know this from many like Indian friends and stuff like that. I think it's so beautiful how family oriented they are. Meanwhile, in Western context, autonomy often means independence from the family. So this will change career choices, life design, and definition of success. So something to think about as well. Another thing that I think is really important to note is that there is a shadow side of every cultural strength. So every culture is optimizing for something, but that also means there are drawbacks. So a cultural strength of high discipline, it might lead to burnout. So people coming from, maybe some of those countries that really value like pain and perseverance, maybe you're burning out quicker. Strong family ties does mean reduced personal agency, obviously. Radical autonomy might mean that you're more isolated. Endurance of discomfort is going to lead to emotional suppression, perhaps. High self-esteem culture might lead to fragility, to failure. And strong social norms, a fear of deviation. So the key insight here is there is no superior culture, okay? Only trade-offs, and it's just really important, and I think also very interesting. I enjoyed doing this research to learn about this. So the practical reflection here is, I think it's really great if you can ask yourself right now, when I fail, do I criticize myself, protect my self-esteem, fear social judgment? Do I see rest as earned, necessary, or indulgent? Who defines success for me? What cultural beliefs about work and suffering did I inherit, and which ones still serve me? So the core takeaway here is that self-improvement isn't just about habits and discipline, it's about the cultural story you inherited about what makes a good human. And maturity may mean not rejecting your culture, but consciously choosing how you relate to it, what parts you're going to keep, and maybe what parts you will adopt from other cultures.